I'm John DeMont, a columnist for the SaltWire network. I'm joined today by Rae Willier, who lives in British Columbia now, but grew up in Nova Scotia in Dartmouth. And Rae posted a very moving um, bit of information on Facebook the other day, which has to do with the past and the present. Why don't you tell us a bit about that, if you would, Rae? What did you say on Facebook?
So, what I said on Facebook was that about 15 years ago, I was in a really dark place in my life where I was planning to basically end my life. And in preparation of doing that, I donated every single thing that I owned to the Salvation Army. And I mean, literally every single thing I owned,
Wow.
except for the clothes that were on my back. And among the things that I donated were some very, very precious childhood artifacts from both my mother and my late grandfather. And so it was kind of like a little desperate attempt to possibly see them again.
Yeah, wait, tell us about those artifacts. What were they?
So one of them was a gunned bear from my late grandfather. It was just a brown bear, a really basic brown bear, but he bought it for me before I was born. And it had a little hospital bracelet on its leg that had my name on it. So I think that I took the hospital bracelet off of it when I donated it, but it was just like a really special bear. And now that my grandfather's passed, it means even more to me. And the other thing was a little reindeer, and it was just like kind of a doll. It was a very basic, my mom says that it was a very basic, like, pattern where you just cut it out and sew it together. And so she had hand sewn this reindeer doll that has a little skirt on. And we together had named it Olive because we had this joke that in the Rudolph song, there's an Olive, the other reindeer. And so we were like, okay, who's Olive? That's Olive. I
Yeah,
have Olive
perfect.
now.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. That's great. Tell us, so you're in a dark place. Tell us about your life. So 15 years ago, how old were you and where were you living? What was your life like?
so I was like 22, 23 ish, and I was living in Halifax. And what had happened for me at that time was I had just gotten myself in a place of like health and togetherness because I'd actually spent my sort of teenage years on the streets. I've lived on the streets from the age of 13 to 18 or 19. And then once I was just kind of re-enrolling into high school, and because I obviously couldn't do high school as a drug addict. So when I was re-enrolling into high school in my late teens, early 20s, and like trying to do all those things that I caught up on, I actually ended up in what I consider to be a really like healthy and safe and good relationship. And I couldn't handle that. And basically, because all I was used to was like toxic. Like I was a punk rock kid on the streets. I was a drunk. I was an addict. And all I was used to was toxic. So I entered into this like really healthy relationship and I imploded. Like I
Hmm.
completely destroyed it. I acted in really like mentally.
Intentionally, you destroyed it.
I unintentionally, I did not
Unintentionally.
mean to. It was
Yeah.
like it was completely like subconscious thing because I didn't understand how to be healthy and like doing toxic things was what felt safe to me. So I was like pretty mentally and emotionally abusive and kind of destroyed that. And once I realized what I had done, I felt like I couldn't like once I realized that once I was a sober person trying to be a human in the world with other humans, I couldn't do it. And so I didn't want to be here anymore. Like sort of my first attempt at health and sobriety felt like a fail. And so
Yeah.
I, yeah, fell off
How
the
close,
wagon.
you said that you were close to taking your own life. How close?
Like I said, I got rid of every single thing that I owned and I started drinking again. And I
Yeah.
had a plan, like I had a firm plan. There was some hard drugs that I had never tried before because I had done a lot of drugs, but there was some that I had never tried before. And I thought that if I tried the right drug in the right amount, that I would have a very happy ending. And so,
Mm.
yeah, I got rid of everything that I owned and I had a plan in place and I was ready to go. So,
And what happened between then and now? That's a big question, I know, but
Yeah. So between then and now, I sort of punished myself in a lot of other ways. I just like did a lot of different self-destructing. I drank a lot. I engaged in many more toxic relationships, and things were just like really haywire. And then eventually I came to a point where I had an opportunity to go live on some land. And this was like a fully self sustaining property where everything fed itself and fed into itself. We didn't need anything. We had chickens, we had orchards, we had gardens, and I took care of the chickens in one of the gardens. And I found so much healing in that and so much like connection in my spirit. And there was so many really good people there who were just doing things really differently. And I was able to see that sort of the way that I feel inside isn't completely alien and wrong. And incidentally, recently I ended up finding out that there's a high likelihood that I'm autistic. So there's very, very good reason why I've experienced many, many, many of the things that I've experienced in my past. And I've been able to, with that knowledge, then sort of refocus my lens on my past and see where I was coming from and how I was reacting. And then in that, it's brought up a lot for me, including all of the things that I've lost. Among the many like really, really cool toys from the 80s, because I was born in 1985. So I have like super cool millennial stuff also that I was really sad about. Like, my popple, my puffalump, stuff like that. But like among all those things was definitely like all of the other reindeer and my bear from my grandpa. So
Yeah. And this community you spoke of, which sounds wonderful, where was that, by the way? Was that Nova Scotia or was that somewhere else?
it was in California.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Yeah, so
Great.
one of the self-destructive things I did was hitchhike around a lot. I did a lot of like drifting around,
Yeah.
just hitchhiking, and so I ended up in a lot of interesting places. So
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
in Northern California.
So when you divested yourself of all these possessions, including the reindeer and the bear, that was basically a sort of getting ready to enact your plan to end things, was it? You're
Yeah,
just unburdening,
yeah,
just cleaning out the house, getting ready for what was going to come next, which didn't sound great.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
I was ready to go, and
yeah,
I was punishing myself in every way that I could.
yeah. So tell us about your life now. You have a dog. You
I have two actually.
have
They're really
two dogs.
dogs. Yeah, I have two dogs, and I'm super, super fortunate to like have great counseling and really good like supports where I'm able to live
Yeah,
in subsidized housing here in BC. So I
yeah,
have like safe, sheltered space and two really great dogs. The Chihuahua is a puppy. She's
yeah.
just the sweetest, and I also finally caved to taking medication. I refused my entire life to taking medication. So I decided relatively recently, to take medication. And so the puppy is
What's that for, Ray? What's the medication for?
for my PTSD. So I was diagnosed with post traumatic stress disorder and depression and anxiety, which all I can now see are probably a result of living my life with autism and not knowing it.
Right.
So I'm medicated now. I'm medicated on an antidepressant that helps me with also like some other symptoms that I've
Yeah.
experienced
Yeah.
from depression and stuff like that. And so that medicine helps me by collecting serotonin, and my puppy helps me by creating the serotonin. So they're working
Oh,
together in this
wonderful.
really beautiful
Yeah.
relationship to
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
rebuild my happiness. And yeah, it's the awareness has really helped me a
Sure.
lot.
Why now? Why now to search for these things from so long ago? Is something going on particularly now that has made you reach out?
I feel like I'm just becoming aware. Like I feel like I was kind of floating through life, not wanting to feel things, not wanting to be present, not wanting to like acknowledge the grief of my past. And in the last like year or so, I've been in counseling and I've been stable enough to be able to not be in survival mode. I was basically houseless for like, even when I got off the streets, I lived in a vehicle. Like I never had anywhere stable to live. I was basically houseless until 3 years ago. So now that I've like been in a place of stability for long enough to even be able to process it, I think is why it's all coming up for me. I'm starting to like actually see and actually realize what I went through, which, led me even to apologize to that person that I imploded on, because we had a really beautiful love and I felt so awful about that. So I did reach out and be like, hey, I was toxic. I was abusive. I see that. I'm so sorry. Like I've been doing a lot of sort of things like that, of connecting to it. It does seem like a long time, but I feel like I wasn't here. In a lot of ways, I feel like I'm still 25. So.
What do the bear and the reindeer and the other things you mentioned, what do they mean to you? Why are they so significant?
I feel like a lot of these things, first of all, my mother handmade the deer. Like we named her together and she handmade it. I'm pretty sure she has stitching on the back of her that she's to me even. But so my mother handmade her, and my mother didn't hand make things. When I was younger, my mother was not a crafty person. So the fact that she made me a thing instead of bought me a thing felt like it meant the entire world to me. Like I felt like my mom really loved me because she made me this beautiful deer. And then my grandpa, he's not with us anymore, and I don't have anything from him. He had built me a shelf once that got lost in a flood, and I don't have anything at all from him. So that's not true. I have an old handkerchief that my mom gave me, but that was from him. That bear was from him. He bought it for my baby self before I was born. So it just means a lot.
And they're the two most important people in your life? Your grandfather and your mom?
I feel like all of my grandparents, I don't have any grandparents left. And I feel like all of my grandparents are really, really the most important people in my life. And my mom for sure has been like one consistent body who's helped through and been there, except for times when I wasn't to detach.
Right. We spoke just a little bit earlier in the conversation just about your younger years, and before we went on, you talked about being a squeegee kid. Can you talk just a bit about the years when you were on the street, and even just before that? It sounds like you had a hard young life.
Yeah, so we definitely grew up in poverty. My mom was in subsidized housing for a long time, and I did have a hard time because I was different from everybody, and I had a really hard time connecting to people. So I spent a lot of time alone, and I didn't really understand why I was different or why I felt different. So I ended up discovering drugs at a very young age, and when I discovered drugs, they made me feel not so different, or maybe I didn't feel bad about how different I was. Like I was able to connect with other people and like kind of a community of drug addicts. And at that point, I was too involved in drugs to be able to be anywhere or anything other than a drug addict. I was like 24/7 high or drunk. And so I ended up leaving my house because I just didn't have time to be going back and forth from there because she lived kind of like half an hour out. Anyways, I found community when I was a drug addict. And then because I was so young when I was on the streets, a bunch of quite older than me people took me under their wing. There was this older gentleman that everybody referred to as Beast. His name was Adam, but he was probably in his 30s at the time. And he made sure that all of the other street people kept an eye on me at all times. There was probably about 20 people that were on the street at that times that were all like squeegeeing together and like finding abandoned buildings to live in. They showed me the parkade to sleep in. They showed me the church graveyard that I could sleep in where nobody would bug me because, who's going to bug you when you're sleeping in a graveyard? They showed me day old dollar slices. The Tim Hortons on Spring Garden used to bring us their old donuts at the end of the day. But like I was very well taken care of. They really, really protected me. They made sure that I knew how to eat, where to sleep, and how to squeegee to get my money for beer and cigarettes. I'm not saying it was a beautiful upbringing. I'm not saying they took me in amazing ways, but they kept me alive.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for that.
Yeah. What has the response been since you put this this ask on Facebook? What kind of response have you gotten?
I've had so many people just like, because I kind of didn't expect people to be like, "Wow, I'm so glad you're here." But that's been the big response, is people being like, "Wow, like I'm so happy you didn't take your life. I'm so glad you're still here." Like I don't know any of these people. I have no idea.
They're all strangers.
They're all strangers. They're
Wow.
just like, "I'm just so glad that you're still here." And I'm like, I didn't even, that was like a little blip for me. That was like an irrelevant detail. I was like, "Hey,
Yeah.
I'm really looking for these things. Here's why." Like I didn't even
Right.
consider that part because I'm not
Right.
really emotionally connected to it as I
Yeah.
was, like I'm still beginning to emotionally connect to my past, as it were. So yeah, it's hard for me to see that as myself, and all these people being like, "Wow, I'm so glad you're still here." I'm like,
Yeah.
that does feel nice.
That's very nice. Yeah, that's absolutely nice. What do they, and I guess I asked you this in a different form earlier, but what do these things, these items, they are things from your grandfather and something from your mom, and that's very important. Do they signify anything to you of your sort of your journey and where you are now? The fact that you're asking for them again.
Yeah, I feel like it's a really important connection to who I was, because that's who I'm trying to really reconnect to, is in who I'm becoming now. I want to return to that child self who felt sort of abandoned and odd and neglected. I want to like return to that sort of child self and like nurture that child self and reconnect. Like I really, yeah, I feel like it would be such a good vessel for reconnection, and just to have those pieces of my childhood present. And like I'm older now, I'm 37, like to have those pieces of my childhood present and to be able to carry them forward in my journey, just to like know I made it. Like I survived. I threw all these things away because I wasn't going to be here anymore, and here I am. I
Yeah.
made it. So
Wonderful. Do you, in terms of sort of the detective work side of things, I mean, have you got any clues, any good leads on where they might be or anything? Or
honestly, I have no idea. So my uncle who helped me clear my things out drove a Subaru at the time, and the Subaru was so full that I couldn't even fit in it. Everything, all the foot space, all out to the ceiling, like there was barely room for him to drive the vehicle. He filled the entire Subaru station wagon with all my things and brought them to a Salvation Army, which I'm not sure of. I would have to get in touch with him again.
yeah, I wonder if that's the one in Halifax or the one in, that's probably the one in Halifax, is it? Was
I think at the time I was living in Spryfield,
right.
so it probably would have been on that side. I'm honestly not sure. I might have cleared it out from Halifax. I might have been also living in the North End. I never really had a consistent home anywhere
Yeah.
until the last 3 years. So
Yeah, yeah. Do you? I mean, realistically, do you think they're going to find them back, or is the point the journey trying to get them back, and what it signifies for you?
it was kind of like it was a long shot. It was a long shot, and it still feels like a long shot. It's not like I'm like clinging to this hope of getting them back. And also, if a person has them and adores them, that will warm my heart. If they like have them and love them, and they're like, I don't ever want to part with these because they mean so much to me, that would warm my heart too. Just to know that they're connected to something else, I would feel good about that, I think. So like I'm not. It's not like a desperate need, but it would it would feel really great to be able to hold those again. Like it would feel really great to be able to have those in my life again. And so I think that it was just a long shot, really. I was just shooting it out there to see if anything would come back. It's not anything.
It'd be a great Christmas story if they did come back, wouldn't it?
Wouldn't it?
Yeah. Look, that's great, Rae. I wish you all the luck, and very nice to talk to you. And it's so wonderful to hear that you're where you are now, and yeah, it's just wonderful. Thanks a million.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I'm John DeMont for the SaltWire Network.